This is my Cannondale Killer V with its electric motor and battery and a whole lot of other goodies on it, because the more I rode it, the more I found that I needed some places to store things and have a map system for my GPS to help me get around. Put my phone in there. It's got a little bag on the back. It's got a lock mounted to it. It's got lights and a rear view mirror. It's really decked out the way I like it, except for the brakes. I've run into some trouble with the brakes on more than one occasion where I've almost rear-ended cars that slammed on their brakes because I can't slow down as fast as them with all the weight of the motor and the battery and my big fat belly, so it's just not stopping quick enough for me. So rather than go to the trouble and expense of trying to fit new disc brakes to these old wheels and the old frame and all that good stuff, I decided I'd go a different route. And this is what I mean by a different route. I bought a bike that already has disc brakes on it. This is a 2016 Ghost Kato 7, and forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, that's the name of the model of the bike. And it came with pretty great disc brakes already on it. They're Shimano 180s in the front and Shimano 160s in the rear. But we're going to be pulling those off, even though they're brand spanking new and they work pretty well. There are better brakes out there. So what I did was I ordered some different brakes for this bike. These are the Shimano Dior XT, calipers and brake levers already pre-bled in a kit. And then there's these XTR Ice Tech rotors, and these are the best rotors that I could find. I wanted to get the, a larger diameter for the front, so you see there that this is a 203 for the front, and that's the adapter for the post type mount. And again a 180 for the rear, because I'm going to take that adapter that's already on the front of the bike and mount it onto the rear for increasing the rotors on the front and back. This is a new Bafang BBSHD, the heavy duty motor. It's 1,000 watts. And a smaller tooth chain ring here, and this adapter will allow you to put other chain rings on it, but it does have some alignment issues, so it might not be the right one for you. We'll have to look at how it even mounts on this bike, but let's get cracking on this thing and start putting on some new brakes. So we've got it up on the trusty repair stand there, so let's get started and take off this front wheel and front brake. And this is just an old school quick release, not a through axle or anything fancy. This was a $1,000 bike at REI. There we go. Okay, there's two 5mm bolts that hold this guy on. We're just going to remove them both. But don't discard them, and keep the washers in the order that they're in, because we are going to keep those same washers on our new brakes. And we're also going to keep this adapter here and use it on the rear. There's our adapter. And there's our bolt. And you can see that the washers are stacked in a particular order, and that's important. That's how you will adjust it to fit around the new brake. So don't misplace those. And they are different lengths too, so the shorter one is on the bottom on this side. There's also this wire management here, so we're going to take this off. Or cable management, I should say, or hydraulic line management, however you want to put it. So we're going to take this guy off of here too, and then unclamp him so that we can reuse that on the new brakes. So in order to remove that lever, I got to remove this grip, and for me there's just one locking nut on this guy. Once that's loose, you can slide the grip off. And Ghost must be really proud of their bikes, by the way. They put Ghost on everything. Ghost is on the bars, it's on the stem cover, it's all over the frame, of course. When I bought it, it had stickers all over the shock, all over the wheels, but I took those off, except for the one on the front right now. I need to get to that, but they put it on the seat post, they put it on the seat itself. Ghost is written all over this damn thing. And then there's another 5mm bolt here to release the front brake lever. So I'm just going to loosen that enough that I can slide the lever off the bar, and then we'll have that front brake off. Now that that's loose, we can slide the lever off. And again, sizing these XT pre-bled kit brakes up to the old ones, you'll see that the cable is longer. A smart person, not me right now, but a smart person would figure out the exact length of the old cable and then mark on this one where that cut needs to be, and then cut them before even putting them on the bike, and bleed the kit again once it's back on the bike. But I'm not going to bother. We'll see how they look with a little bit of extra length. We're only talking about, that's fairly significant actually, it might look a little ridiculous, but we'll see once it's on the bike. We are going to be converting this to a mid-drive. We won't need the front shifter anymore, so we might as well take that off too while we're here. So again, I'm just loosening this guy enough to make it so I can slide this lever off. So if you pull your bars all the way to the left, you'll find that you have enough slack in that line to get it loose. And then you'll see that underneath the bike there are 3 brackets, at least in my case, that are holding the lines in place. I'm going to go ahead and remove those because it'll not only help us remove that front shifter, but also will help us remove the rear brake. And then after you have those off, set them aside somewhere smart so that you'll be able to find them when we're ready to put it back together. Okay, to complete the removal of the front shifter, I'm just going to remove this cable here, and that's what's holding the cable that comes from the front shifter to that front derailleur. And then when I slide that out of there, I should be able to pull that whole cable off and free up that front shifter. With that screw loose, you get it? You can remove that. So now the shifter is free. No more shifter. I'll remove that front derailleur when we remove the bottom bracket and install the motor, but for now let's focus on the brakes. You'll see that I got an adapter here. This is a Shimano disc brake mount adapter. For the front is what the F means. It's a 203 and it's post to post. So this just takes the old 160 mount and converts it to a 203. You'll notice that there was an adapter on there before. That's that 180 mount that we used on the rear. And with that adapter, you can see that it has it labeled up. It did also come with the bolts that you need to attach it to the bike, and they did also include blue Loctite on the bolt from the factory. So to install that adapter, I'm going to see where it says up again. I'm going to take either one of these bolts. They're both the same length because this adapter is slightly different than the old one was. Again, not a heck of a lot to it here. And we'll just tighten those down, and these you don't really need to make loose at this point because the adjustments will be done on these other 2 new holes that the adapter creates for the 203 rotor. Then up front I'm going to start by sliding the lever on, and that'll just make it so we're not dropping the caliper on the floor while we try and fit it. And you could use the old hardware from the rear of the bike, but it's identical to the new hardware that's included with the new brakes, and because there's fresh Loctite on these, I'm just going to use the ones that came with the new brakes. And then remember your routing, so it wraps through the front. There's a bracket, as you recall, in the front, and we're just going to put the rotor into place, or the caliper rather, in place. And these are just finger tight now, just to keep it from walking away on us. And then you can loosely place the levers kind of where you'd like them and just tighten them in to hold them in place. And you can reinstall your grips. And in my case, I'm not going to install another Ghost advertisement. I'm going to put these Ergon grips. These are the GS1L, and the L stands for large. They also make them in a smaller size. But anyway, I thought they were pretty cool, and I do dig them. I mean, they have a little bit of flex to them. So this isn't really super rigid. I don't know if you can really see that when I push on it with my thumb, but it just gives you a little bit more comfort, a little bit more space for your hand, and I have pretty large hands. So I dig them. I'm excited about them. But anyway, let's just put them on the bike and see how they look. And these are simple installation. They do have one lock nut. Instead of on the inside, it's on the end. So you do want to make sure that you get it all the way flush with the end of the bar. Then you want to position it such that when you're riding, it's kind of posturing your hand in the right way so that you're not leaning way back and putting all that strain on your wrist. So you want it to be fairly flat. We can get to that detail a little bit later. I do wish they made them in all black, because it does look a little goofy on this particular bike to have them gray with black. But what can you do? You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? And that's your one locking ring, and there's a little end cap to throw in there. I'm going to leave one of them out because I'm going to put a rear view mirror on this bike, because I will ride it on the dirt but also on the road. Alright, and to remove the quick release, we just unscrew this until you can't anymore, and then that will come off, and you'll see that there's a spring in there. Remember the orientation of that spring, it's narrow towards the hub. And now when we flip this over, you can simply remove this pin, and now we're ready to remove the rotor. Couldn't be easier, really. I know you'll need this goofy Shimano tool, really only good for this one task. It slides into that same spot as the quick release, and then its teeth line up with the teeth on the lock ring that is on the center lock rotor. And then I have a handy breaker bar here that I'll hook up to that little tool. And then once we start cranking this guy loose, we can remove the rotor and put on our new Shimano XTR with Ice Tech. So this is just sitting here. So our rotor is now off, and that's what that looks like if you wanted to see the inside of it and how it grabs on to the hub. This is our new rotor in 203. Now we're gonna give it a good rub down with just some rubbing alcohol. That's what we have here. A good cleaning all the way around on both sides. So you just want to do a good job of getting it cleaned up before you install it and risk contaminating your pads. So take your time on this process. And once you have them perfectly cleaned up the way you like, you can slide this guy on. There's really no wrong way to put it on there. Well, you could put it on upside down, but then you'd really have to not be paying attention to do that. It does come with new hardware. There's a new lock ring in there, and we'll go ahead and use that. And you'll notice on here that it does say to tighten it to 40 Newton meters. If your torque wrench isn't in Newton meters, like mine isn't, it's in foot-pounds, the calculation is roughly 73-74%. So 40 Newton meters is about 30 or 29.5 or whatever foot-pounds. So I set my torque wrench to just under 30 foot-pounds. You can slide that guy in there. Put my torque wrench on you. And we'll tighten the torque wrench until you hear the click. There we go. We've got our quick release pin here, and you got to make sure you don't put any of that grease that's on that quick release shaft in or onto your rotor. Make sure you keep everything clean. Now I've flipped it over for you. So we put the spring on with the pointy end down, the more narrow end of the cone, and we just tighten this up a little bit, and we can put it back on the bike. Okay, remove the red plastic pad separator. And take your wheel, slide them in. You can tighten this down just a little bit, then you'll feel it start to snug up. You want it to have a little bit of torque, but not so much that you're crushing it. And then you can hear that it's touching the pads, and that's because this isn't centered yet. So the trick here is to squeeze the brakes now on that front brake, and then tighten this down with the brake lever squeezing, and that'll center it automatically. So now that that front wheel is on and centered and everything's good that way, I'm going to squeeze that front brake while tightening these. And if all goes well, that should automatically center it. One of the good tricks here to do is to take anything white and put it behind your rotor, and then look down in between the calipers, or the pads rather. And then when you spin the wheel, you should be able to see if there's a gap between them. And that'll tell you when it's centered, and that's when you start to tighten the bolts. But the trick is to not tighten the bolts too much, because that can shift the caliper and move things out of center. But what you're listening for is what you don't hear right now, which is that little bit of rub. So right now this one's perfectly centered. So let's move to the rear and do this all over again. And then once you have your rotors spinning like this without any of that clanging shishing noise, then you know you've got it centered really well. You can finish setting your bolts and keep testing it like that, and you know you got it perfect when it rotates backwards with the weight of the reflector pulling it down. Worth noting too, the bracket from the front for the 180, where it says up, actually points down, at least on my bike, to get it to line up appropriately with the rotor. So next step after we seat these brake pads is to put on a motor and battery and turn this into an e-bike, which is going to make it even more fun. We're going to start by backing off these bolts on this arm, and these are tight, and they're equally tight on each side, so you got to loosen one a little bit and then loosen the other a little bit until you get that stress off of the bolts, and then they come off a little easier. Now this is on the left side crank arm. You'll need a tool like this one. It's got a, an adapter that fits into this gizmo here. This is not super tight, it's just hand tight. You can back this plug out of here. That's that plug. Okay, then you can slide this guy off, which for me is just a lot of wiggling. There we go. So now he's off completely. We'll go over to the other side. One of the things we no longer need is this front derailleur. So I've already taken the bolt out of the other side, and there's a little torque spit here that'll allow me to take the derailleur off without removing the chain completely, because I'd rather not. Taking that little torque spit out, and I can pull this apart and slide it over the chain. There we go, we're free. So now that we have the derailleur out of the way and the crank arm is off the other side of the bike, we can remove this side, and it should just all slide out and leave the housing in place for us to remove next. So let's start by removing the chain. It is a greasy bugger, so I'm going to be a little dainty about it. Get it out of the way. And now we're going to give this guy a tap on the other side. And you can use any hammer that you have laying around. This is one of my old ones. But if that's not enough muscle, you can always grab a little mini sledge. I think I'll start with the mini sledge. I've got a piece of wood I'm going to place between the crank arm. Give him a tap. You can see that he's free. There you go. You can see that it's free, and I can just slide it out the rest of the way. Okay, I've turned the bike around for you again, so now we're on the, your left side or the non-drive side. And this is my bottom bracket tool. So we'll fit it over there. And this side is left loose, just like a standard threaded. And the other side is going to be right loose on the drive side. But we'll get this guy taken off. Finicky as it might be, and it is a little snug, too snug for fingertip tightening or loosening. There we go. Then we'll flip the bike around, and this is taking a spacer and everything with it. That's part of the sleeve. Now we have the bike turned around, and on the drive side it's right to loosen. Oops, sorry about that. So we're turning it right, which feels really weird, but it's a bicycle, so lots of things are weird about bicycles. This is kind of nice because this is a brand new bike. My other electric bike was not brand new. The parts didn't come apart quite so smoothly. There you go. And now you have a naked bottom bracket. And with all the standard bits out of the way, we're ready to install the BBSHD. That's the 1,000-watt killer machine. And it just slides into our bottom bracket, like so. You can grab this bracket, and it does have little teeth on one side. The other side has indentations. You want the teeth side facing in. And that just slides over this guy and lines up with these threaded holes on the motor. And then you've got this spanner nut, which goes on here. And it is a goofy spanner wrench nut, so you're going to want to thread that on with your spanner wrench. And you've got these two bolts that come as part of your kit. I'm going to put a little blue Loctite on them before I put them in. This is that blue thread locker. And these go into each of these corresponding holes. They're hard to miss, they line up nicely. And I'm going to tighten these down very last, because the idea is actually to get this tight to the frame and square with the frame, and then those are just holding it into place and helping bite the bracket into the frame. I'm going to get this guy out of the way. This is my spanner wrench. Make sure it's all the way up. And then once you have that spanner bolt as tight as you can get it, you can start cranking these guys down. And I'm just kind of going every other, getting a bit of a crank in so that they're evenly pressing into the frame. And then after that, we'll take this guy here. He's our little spanner cover. And we'll use our bottom bracket tool to tighten that down. That's what it looks like. There we go. I'll grab my bottom bracket tool, which is hiding from me. I'll peer up. Oh, there it is. Always the last place you look, because after that you found it. Give that a little tightening. And that creaking noise you're hearing is not the bike, it's my rack. Alright, now that the bottom bracket is installed, we can move on to the speed sensor and the throttle and the gauges and the blah blah blah. Alright, the speed sensor, so that's this guy here. You'll see it has a few different pieces to it. They slide together like this. And there's a little hole there for this tiny screw that comes in this kit. So if you find the little bitty screw, it's for this position here, and it holds the sensor away from your tire. And let me show you where it mounts on the bike. So on my bike, I'm putting it right here, and then you can adjust its depth to fit your bike so that when it goes by, it lines up with the spoke where you're going to put the magnet. And this is the magnet. You can see it grabs onto things pretty well. It's just two pieces twisted together. One of them has a groove in it. You can see that groove there. And that groove allows you to slide it over your spoke and then tighten this down over the top of it to pinch it onto the spoke. Let's pick a spoke to put it on. And we just want one that's closer to this side of the frame than the other. And we'll tighten it on. And just do it hand tight for now. You can go back in and tighten it up firmer later. You can slide them down a little bit. Get it into the spot that we want it. Then we can take this gizmo and line it up with it. So we might need to take a little bit of it out so that it doesn't smash into it. We don't want it clicking against it, but we want it tight. And you can see on this little crosshair, that's where we want to line up your magnet. And then all that I do now is I take this guy and I line him up with about where I want that to go, and I press it out until it's touching that, and then just back it off just a hair. You can see that that's lining up. I'm going to back it off just a hair so that we have about 1 millimeter of clearance, and that's where I'll set the screw. Okay, after you have the bracket set at the distance that you want it, you can take your little provided screw and your screwdriver and then just drive that home so that it doesn't slide anymore. There you go, now your speed sensor is ready to install on the bike. And you'll see that there's a little backing here, that's for a sticker, and there's also 2 slots. Those are for zip ties to hold it in place on the bike. So this is the sensor and there's the slot. We'll feed that through on both of them before we put it on the bike. Now we've got the sensor ready to install. I'm going to peel the backing off. So that exposes the sticker piece. I can slide it into place. First I'll stick it. And after the zip ties are secure, I like to nip them as tightly as I can. And then rotate them so they're out of the way and can't catch your ankle or anything when you're riding or slipping. And now you've got good clearance. Show you from above. That's the magnet and how it's passing by the sensor. And you really can't screw this up. There's only one cable as part of the kit that will connect to the speed sensor. And it's the one that looks like this that has a little threaded end on it. And it only goes one way. So if you can see, there's like a portion of that cylinder that's cut off so that those 3 pins will line up. So you can't do this wrong. Alright, so we go ahead and insert that there. And then tighten on this guy. And be conscious about where you're putting your wires so that you can zip tie them out of the way. And also so they don't run into your tire and things like that. So you can see where I looped it through. Right now it's loose, and I will zip tie it into place and get it so that it's less conspicuous before we finish this up. Now let's turn our attention to the bars here. One of the things we need to mount, of course, is the display, and attached to the display is that control switch. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is snap these guys over. I'll figure out the wiring in a minute, but and a lot of guys will actually take this apart and flip it around. What I mean by that is they'll set it so that it's further up, so that this bracket actually mounts to the bottom of this the other way around, which gives you a little bit more visibility out in front of you. But I kind of like it like this for now, so I'm just going to leave it in this configuration. We can always change it later, no big deal. I think I'm going to put the control switch over here next to the brake lever, and that's where the throttle will end up going too, so it's going to be busy on this side unless I can figure out a way to put the throttle on the right side, which is honestly where I'd prefer it. This is that control switch. This is the one that will add or subtract pedal assist or turn the system on and off, and it does fit nicely over my brake lever, so I'm going to leave it on this side. I like that look. Okay, and Bafang did include the hardware that you need to screw this all together. They're very tiny nut and bolt. And there's a spot that seats your nut, which actually doesn't really want to hold it there. So, well, I'm never going to find that. Put that thing in. And these are directional, right? They have a locking end and a non-locking end to get them started. So if you feed it in, then you can feel it'll start to bite, and that's when you start to hit the lock part of the nut. And that's what keeps it firm. There we go. As you can see, these bars have kind of a lot of crap on them, but I do like the way this is placed for the pedal assist up and down and the power of the bike. And then I've got the front shock lockout here. I've got a bell over here, but I'm going to put the throttle on this side and kind of exactly where the bell is now. It's going to be a little bit of a reach to get to it, but that's okay. So I'm going to start by removing the grip and the shifter and the rear brake and this bell. I'm going to slide it in a little bit more, and then we'll put the throttle on this side. So I've loosened this guy here and these two to allow me to slide them off the bars. So now I can pull the grip off and then pull the rear brake lever off. I'll set him down here. I can pull the shifter off. Set him next to that. And then we can slide the bell in a little bit and put the throttle on. I'm ready to slide on the throttle. We can just loosely position everything for now. And the shifter. And the rear brake lever. It is a busy front end for sure. And the grip. Then after you have everything in the position you want it in, you can tighten everything down. But don't over tighten, because then your throttle might stick. So if you get to a point where you feel like your throttle's sticky, loosen it up just a tad, and then test it again and make sure it springs back to position. Alright, starting to look a little bit like an e-bike. We've got our control buttons, our display screen, and our throttle on here. We still need to do the brake cutoffs, and I've got some hydraulic brake cutoffs that are from a universal kit that we're going to install on this bike. Alright, because I spent all of this money on these great brakes, these hydros from Shimano called the Dior XTs, I'm going to use the universal and hydraulic brake cutoff kit, which has magnets, these little guys here, and a sensor that can sense when the magnet gets pulled away from the end of the sensor. So where I'm going to put this is right here, and then I'm going to put the magnet on the end of that adjustment knob so that when I pull the brake it pulls it away from that. But to get the magnet to stick to the end of that plastic piece there, I'm actually going to use some glue. I'm going to put it on the back of that, stick it to this guy, and wait for that to dry. Before I apply any glue, I'm going to hit it with a little bit of sandpaper here to kind of give it a little coarse rough up. It gives the glue something to bite to. I'm going to do the same thing to the back of the magnets. So there's my magnets. Just going to scuff them along with sandpaper to give it, something to bite into. Just a little bit, and then I'm going to clean that off. So you can see they're scuffed, just scratched a little bit. I'm going to clean that off with some rubbing alcohol before I install them. I've got a little rubbing alcohol on a rag here. I'm just going to clean up that connection before we glue it to it. And the same with the magnets. Alright, this is the glue I'm going to be using. It's a two-part mix. So you mix them equal 50-50. I got a little paper plate there that I'm going to mix it on, and a plastic knife that we're going to use to mix and apply. We don't need much of this stuff. As you can see, there's a little cap there. A lot of people don't realize you just poke the top of it. We got a little bit of that. It's just oozing out of the thing. I didn't even twist it. Okay. I'll do the same for this one. Get about the same amount. Oh, that's not coming out as easy as the other stuff did. Ooh, it's stinky. And this is massive overkill, this particular type of glue, for this activity. So I'm just mixing it together. Stick it right onto there. Get some on the back of the magnet. I'll just stick that onto there. Now while this is drying, I'm going to take a piece of electrical tape and just use that to hold it in place. For some reason this glue doesn't stick that well to electrical tape. And now that the glue has pretty much dried on there, I can't take it off anymore, but it does say it takes 4 hours to fully cure. So I'm going to go ahead and install this guy. This is the cutoff sensor that the magnet trips. So I'm just peeling the backing off of the little sticker here, and we'll put it on right in front of this. Oh, that sticker is strong, so be fairly sure it's where you want it to be. And then I'll just secure that cable with a few zip ties. You should also see this wire inside of your kit. It's a little harness. This connects up to the controller on your motor, and this connects up to those 4 pieces that come off of your bars, your brake cutoffs, your monitor, and your throttle. And let's hook that up now. Worth noting is that it's impossible to screw up these connections. These two are for your brake cutoffs. This one is for your throttle, and this one goes to the display, the green one. This is a brake line, a brake cutoff line. And again, it's not possible to mess it up. There's a little tooth on there that you slide in. We'll do the same thing on this one. Another brake cutoff so you can see how those are. Hopefully that's focusing for you. So a little spline on the bottom. Slide them together the right way. And then you've got your display, which is green. Again, it's got a little tooth. So once you've got it lined up, it should just push together. And there's a cap on this one still. This is our throttle. And if you're ever having trouble, like your throttle's not working or something, just go and check these connectors. It's happened to me before on my other bike where those came apart. And that's this line zip tied in. I put it in between those two lines and then wrap it around the brake line as it goes around the motor down there. So just kind of giving you a shot of it sort of cleaned up underneath. Okay, let's go ahead and install the chain ring. This is an aftermarket chain ring, as you can see. It has an adapter on it and a wide, narrow chain ring, so it'll hold the chain on pretty tightly. It's a 42 tooth, so a little bit smaller than the 46 that came with it, so it should give us a little bit more climbing power, though not as much as like a 30 tooth sprocket would. Bafang did include the hardware, and they even put some Loctite on it for us, so let's get those on and put the chain on. I'm not going to drive these all the way home. I'll show you what I mean. It's just like putting lug nuts on a car. If you've ever had to change a tire, we're going to put them on in what's called a star pattern. So just as I'm inserting them here is going to be the pattern that we tighten them in. We're going to jump around like a star. So you don't go just to the one to the next and around in a circle. You're going to go hop, 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 hop. So you're drawing like a star like you did when you were a kid. Or maybe yesterday, depending on who you are. And that just gives it a good, even attachment to the motor. Alright, now we can throw the chain on. Be careful as you're putting the chain on to make sure that you get the wide narrow if you're doing an aftermarket chain ring like this one. I'm going to push down on my... Let me see, I didn't have it quite right. There we go. There we go. There you go. And we can go ahead and throw on the other crank arm. Just make sure that it's installed the opposite direction of the crank arm on the other side, obviously. Want to tighten this guy down very tight, right? So the torque setting of good and tight, because this is pinching it onto that shaft. And I'm about to break my tools when I stop. Alright, now we're going to install our battery mount, but to do that we have to take these water bottle screws out, because that's where we're going to attach our battery to. You want this kind of as low as you can successfully mount it, so that you get that center of gravity as low on the bike as you can. And you also want to make sure that your frame can accommodate this. And if your frame can't accommodate your battery, you can always put it in your pack and then plug it in from your pack, and then your bike looks a little cleaner too that way. Make sure you do a test fit with the battery on it before you put things, tighten them all the way down, because like in my case I'm hitting that screw and I'd rather not have it that tight, so I'm going to pull it up just another few millimeters and then tighten it down. And that's my final setup for how I'm going to have the battery installed. What I'm going to do with this wire is run it right through the back of the frame there, and then I'm going to zip tie it to these other lines over here, where so my brake line and my main controller line. So that's zip tied into place there. I can cut this extra zip tie off. Then I'm going to rotate that in just so that my ankle never gets caught on it. And it'll look a little cleaner to have that out of the way. And I tried to put a little bit of a natural curve in this, just like when you're doing electrical in your home. You don't want to have any 90-degree angles in your electrical. You want to gradual bends as you can do. Okay, our next step here is going to be to install this gear sensor. So it's going to sense when we're shifting gears and turn the motor off during that shift, so that it doesn't mash up our gears quite so much. So the first step in doing that is going to be to remove the cable, and we'll cut that end off of it. I'm just loosening that little bolt there. I can slide the cable out. Now that I have that guy loose, I can cut this end off of it, so I'm just going to snip that. Okay, with that cut off, I'm going to run up to the bars and disconnect the shifter from the front and pull this line into this tube, and then we'll cut it and push it back out and put it back together. I'll show you what I mean. Now we're up at the bars, and we're just going to loosen these bolts up here. I'm going to take the grip off, I'm going to take the brake off, and then loosen the shifter bolt. The good news in my case is that they all use the same Allen key. I'm going to loosen that guy up just to release the grip. And it does have a bar end in it, so that's going to have to come out. Look at the brake, and then the shifter. Get everything good and loose. Now I can pull that grip off. There we go. The bar end came with it. Slide the brake. I don't even need to take it all the way off, just enough to get the cable to where I can pull on it. Let me show you that from down here. So as you can see, this is separated now. That's the cable, so now I can pull on that cable, and it'll pull it inside the tube. We'll get a lot of it out of the way there, just to be sure I don't cut it. Fairly sure I'm not cutting that much off. Now let's go back to the back. Alright, now that we've pulled that line out at the front, there's no line back here anymore. So we just need to pull this guy out of this housing there. You can see that. Then we're going to cut a chunk out of this line that's the size of this guy. So this guy's going to ride right in here, so I'm going to cut it right about there. Okay, let's give him a good cut. Maybe. We can just crush it. Now that he's cut, we can slide our line back through. There's our line. And I've got these little caps that can go over the ends of the cut tubing. So we'll slide that on. And then we will take our gear sensor, shift sensor here. There it goes. There it goes. And we'll make the other side of this. I haven't decided if I want it to ride on top or on the bottom, but I think I'll go like that. Now we'll make the piece that goes from here to there, and we'll use that piece that we cut off to make that happen. Alright, to help me decide how much to cut off, I'm just looking at how deep into the gear sensor the little cap went. So it's giving me a good feel for where I need to cut it. So if I mark that on both sides, because I do want the cable to be the same length, it'll make setting up the shifter a little bit easier. So I'm going to cut off that same amount. This is the piece that I cut off. You can see that it fills the space that the gear sensor took over. Another cap for you here. And I'm going to slide a cap over this, and we can slide the cable through the cap into the tube. And I'm going to take that cap that was on the bike before, that was on the end of this, slide it back in, and I'm going to fish that through. And now that we have it tight in the back of the bike, we can slide the shifter back into its position. Same with our brake lever. Try and line everything up the way it was. Put my grip back on. Alright, so I went and got some pliers. You can see that it's loose. I'm going to pull this tight. Not insanely tight, just enough to pull things together. There you go. And I'm going to tighten this down. And there we go. Now let's check the shifter, make sure that it's still all lined up well. And we'll put a cap over that wire. Select our shifter. Pop it up a gear. Should be performing pretty well. Alright. We're in business. Now I'm going to slide this little wire cap on to the end of this guy to keep it from fraying. Oh, it's already starting to fray. And I'll just crimp it into place with a pair of pliers. That's tight, and we'll keep that wire from falling apart on me. Let's make the shifter sensor connector or connection here. So that's the cap that's on there. I'm going to fish it inside of there, and then we're going to zip tie it up. Alright, so I'm going to zip tie these guys into place, and I'm going to keep in mind which direction the cut piece of zip tie is going to point. So I'm going to slide them up like this, and then feed it in this way, so that I can aim this away from me after I cut it off, so that that little thing after we cut off the excess doesn't stab me in the leg if I fall or if I'm pedaling vigorously and happen to get caught on the back of it. Because if I had flipped it the other way around and zipped it out like this, it would be pointing towards me, and that little sharp thing can get you. So be thoughtful about how you place your zip tie. Alright, now I've got this hot mess of wires to put into place. And what I like to do is just a bunch of zip ties. So I kind of look around under here, I'm curling them into each other, and then I'll zip them together where it makes sense to me. And zip ties are easy to remove. If you find something you don't like, you can always cut it and redo it. But the idea is just to get them organized and up and out of your face, so that there's nothing that's going to rub on a tire, and it just doesn't look totally unsightly and something that's going to get caught on rocks or anything when you're riding off-road. That's after quite a while of zip tying and putting things into place to get it out of the way. I want you to see that there's a little bit of a gap there. I didn't want any of the wires that are bundled together to be touching the bottom of the motor, because they can get hot and I don't want anything to melt and seize under there. So that's how I did it. So that's basically done. I just need to put the battery on and put some pedals on and we can go for a ride. Now you don't want to have to wait for pedals to see this thing work, do you? I wouldn't make you do that. So that's the throttle. I'll show you a shift. So you saw it stop there. Let me show you the brake. So this is throttle on. You can hear it's running. I'm going to pull the brake. And now the motor isn't running even though the throttle's still on. I let off the brake, it starts to go again. It's basically a motorcycle now, and it's awesome. I think we should go for a ride. Let's shift it again. Oh, I love it. It's almost like an automatic. Only not. Alright, so let's program the display. Turn it on here. There we go. So then once you're in this mode, you can double click, and that'll let you switch between miles an hour and kilometers an hour. And you click again, that takes you to the backlight. I'm going to leave that alone. This is the auto off time, so you can say I want it to turn off after it's been idle for 7 minutes. Let's just leave it at 5. This is the wheel diameter, so that's supposed to be a W and a D there. And I have it set at 27, which is my wheel's diameter. One of my last steps here is going to be to get rid of the uncomfortable seat and replace it with the seat from my old e-bike. So it's got a different diameter tube here, so I got this from King Creek, which is an adapter that allows me to insert my very comfortable seat and squishy seat post. Now while that looks ridiculous, it feels so good, I don't care what you say. Alright, let's talk a little bit about chain alignment. So I went for a ride on this and experienced something I wasn't expecting. This chain ring is just not going to work for me, and the adapter that I got for it, because it's lining up my chain just a little bit askew. It's hard to tell there, but when I get it into the higher gears, it'll pop off of this, even though it's wide narrow. And up. You see that kind of extreme angle that the chain is at? We're not even all the way up yet. Let's go up one more, and you'll see that that chain angle gets such that it tries to pull the chain off, and it did happen to me. I was hoping it would happen for you in this video, but so far it's hanging on. But you can see it's a little too steep, and I've got quite a bit of room here between my chain stay and the chain ring. So I'm going to change this chain ring out, and we'll fix this chain line issue. It's just too steep of an angle. You can see that. So long story short, I'm not happy with the chainring alignment, so I've ordered a new one that I'm hoping is going to fit without any spacers. But let's take this one off and go through that process together. So our first step is going to be to remove the crank arm on this side. And this is just the first part of this. This isn't actually going to take it off just by unscrewing this, because it's on with compression. But when we take this guy off, we'll use our crank arm puller, which is a real simple tool, and I'll show you how that works. Try to get you a little side shot here. And just thread this in by hand. Doesn't need too much. And then this guy is the one that you'll need to really tighten down. I haven't even hit the, there we are. So now we're at it. So I'll just get a wrench and we'll start cranking on that. So I've got my 15mm wrench now, and we're just going to tighten that into the bike until it breaks that arm loose, and you'll feel it get easier. And that's how you know you've got it, and you can see it start to pull it off. And you just loosen that guy up, and you're done. Okay, that's the chain out of the way. Let's pop those bolts off. Now let me show you the difference in offset on these guys. So wiggle that guy off. So this is the chainring that I just took off that had not enough offset for my particular bike's situation, and it appears that it has just about 9 or 8 millimeters of offset. So if you look at that down a little lower, I can zoom in on it for you. If you look at the gap there, so that's where it's touching the table versus the inside of the chainring. It's about, I'd say, more like 8 millimeters of offset. This is the chainring that I ordered to replace it, and it's got more like 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters of offset. If I can show you that, it's significantly different. I'm hoping it's not too much different to where it's touching the frame, because then I need to get an adapter, which at this point I don't have, so I'd have to go order one. And this is the overweight. Man, this thing feels heavy, especially compared to this bling ring. This thing is so much lighter. It's unbelievable. It's got to be a fraction of the weight of this big steel dog that came with the bike, or came with the motor rather. And its offset is a little bit less than the bling ring, so it's about, looks like 16 or 17 millimeters, if you can see in there. Try to make it so you can catch that. But under 2 centimeters for sure. So in summary, you're about 8 millimeters of offset here, you're about 20 millimeters of offset there, and you're about 17 millimeters of offset here. Again, this is the largest offset of these chain rings that I have in front of me, but this is a 46 tooth versus a 42 tooth, so I'm hoping I'm going to end up having clearance, but we'll see here in a minute. But if I don't, there are spacers that you can get that will pull it away from the bike. You might end up having to get a little bit longer bolts to help set up your particular situation, but you just want to get as close to lined up as you can, so that your middle gear on your rear cogs are lined up with the chainring, so that as you shift gears, it doesn't pull it off or put too much angle on the chain. Alright, let's try and fit this just to see if it's going to bump my chain stay. And I look like I got super duper lucky. Let me show you here. Look at what a lucky dog I am. See that? Barely any gap at all, which is just perfect for me. So I'm feeling pretty lucky. Let's bolt the sucker on and get the chain on and go for a ride. Alright, let's put the chain back on and be careful of the wide narrow. Well, that was easy. So that's in my first gear. And this is, I think it's a 10-speed rotor railer, if I'm not mistaken. So this would work on an 11 speed. Giving me plenty. Chain is not freaking out. And that is 9 miles an hour in first gear. It's gonna go crazy if we start shifting. So let me watch the speed. That's second gear, third gear, and this is in also level 1. Let's crank it up. Whoa. Let's see, we're getting 19, 20 miles an hour out of third gear. That's silly. Let's shift it. $23 miles an hour out of fourth. $26 out of fifth. 29 out of sixth. I hope this thing doesn't fly off. 32 out of 7. 37 out of 8. Not even in the first yet. Good lord. 42 miles an hour. Let me show you how that looks. Good grief. Let's shift it again. So this is 10th gear for me. Seems to be upset. But look at the bike, it's going to shake itself to pieces. Good times. Let's see those new disc brakes work. Eek. So I think we just demonstrated that this thing is much more powerful than my BBSO2, that 750 watt version. I'm starting to wonder if this is really only 1,000 watts. It's kind of outrageous. But let's get the crank arm back on and go for a ride. Alright, you can see my taillights on. I just got back from a little bit of a ride and it was a riot! And then if I wanted to shift up like I'm slowing down, as I'm slowing down, I'll be shifting by pedaling, but the motor's not engaged. Let's give it all the throttle. That's 35. Technically I'm speeding. That's about all I can get out of it, I think, on a flat. This is very steep here. A little bit of mash, but I'm going straight up, guys. This is the hill I wouldn't even tackle on my bike normally.
This is downhill. I'm not doing anything. Now they're almost straight up. I'm learning to tug a little bit. People that say you don't get a workout riding an e-bike need to get an e-bike. This is almost straight downhill. I'm getting to test my new brakes. They're working really well. Actually seem to like getting hot. Okay, girl. Good girl. Good girl.